Volume between Nigeria and China has expanded by about 10% in the last year, yielding more than $15 billion in value. Nigeria is amongst China's most important trading partners in Africa. Both countries are forecasting a significant rise in trade volumes in the coming years as various trade deals get concluded.
Nigeria and China's $2.5 billion or 16 billion yuan currency swap agreement was signed in April after a painstaking 2 years of negotiation. The deal, which aims to boost commercial ties and reduce the need for US dollars in bilateral trade, was officially concluded between the Central Bank of Nigeria and the People's Bank of China in Beijing.
Something big is happening, and almost nobody saw it coming. Nigeria, Africa's biggest economy. China, the world's fastest-growing superpower. And the United States, the country that has dominated global politics for decades, are now caught in a shocking new showdown, because just a few days ago, Nigeria and China made a move that Washington never expected. A move so bold, so surprising, that U.S. officials are now scrambling for answers. Was it an oil deal? A military partnership? A trade agreement that cuts America out? Or something even bigger? Whatever it is, it has sent shockwaves through the entire U.S. government, Wall Street, and the global energy market. American analysts are calling it a dangerous turning point. Others are saying it's the moment the U.S. loses its influence in Africa. So what exactly happened? Why are top American politicians suddenly holding emergency meetings about Nigeria? And how did China become powerful enough to challenge the United States right in Africa's most strategic nation? Today we break everything down clearly, simply, and with facts the mainstream media refuses to explain. Let's go deeper into this global earthquake. Because the world is changing faster than anyone imagined. Nigeria has always been one of the most important countries in Africa, not just because of its population, not just because of its culture, but because of its power, its oil, its economy, and its strategic position on the global stage. For decades, world powers, especially the United States, have watched Nigeria closely, because whoever wins Nigeria often wins Africa, and whoever wins Africa controls one of the world's most important regions for resources, trade routes, and future growth. But recently, something happened that completely shocked Washington, a move that American officials never expected. A move that has now changed the balance of global power in ways many people still don't understand. Nigeria and China quietly signed an agreement so bold, so strategic, and so game-changing, that the United States is now scrambling behind closed doors to respond. American analysts are calling it a global earthquake. Others are saying it is the biggest challenge to U.S. influence in West Africa in 30 years. So what exactly did Nigeria and China do? Why is America suddenly in panic mode? And what does this mean for the future of Africa, the world economy, and the global competition between the US and China? To understand this, we need to go way back to how Nigeria became so important, and how China slowly, quietly built a level of influence that the United States did not take seriously until it was too late. For years, America believed that Nigeria would always remain in its orbit. Washington assumed Nigeria would always rely on the West for loans, military cooperation, oil investments, and political partnerships. But China was watching. China understood Nigeria's potential long before America took it seriously. China saw a nation with massive oil reserves, a booming population, a gateway to West Africa, a huge consumer market, and a government hungry for rapid development. And instead of making speeches, China made offers, real offers, tangible offers. Nigeria could not ignore. China built railways. China built roads. China offered loans with fewer political conditions. China invested in oil, gas, infrastructure, mining, manufacturing, and technology. While the West often warned, criticized, or hesitated, China delivered. But none of this fully explains the shock America is feeling today, because what happened recently is far bigger, far more strategic, and far more controversial. Nigeria and China did something the U.S. did not think was possible. They formed a new type of partnership, one that directly challenges U.S. influence in Africa and threatens America's control over key sectors of the global economy. And it started with one major decision. Nigeria approved a massive multi-billion-dollar oil and infrastructure partnership with China, one that completely leaves out the United States. For years, American companies expected Nigeria to stick with Western oil giants. But instead, Nigeria gave China access to sectors that Washington considered off-limits. This partnership is not just about oil. It includes pipeline construction, refinery upgrades, advanced gas processing facilities, and a new national energy corridor that will give China unprecedented influence in the region. What shocked America the most is not the size of the deal, though it is huge, it's the symbolism. Nigeria, Africa's biggest oil producer, chose China over the United States at a time when the global energy market is unstable and competition for influence is at an all-time high. But that was only the beginning. Nigeria also agreed to allow Chinese state-backed companies to fund and support major transportation projects that connect ports, highways, and industrial zones. These projects are designed to boost Nigeria's economy, but they also give China long-term strategic access to West African trade routes. Washington sees this as a direct threat because whoever controls the trade routes controls the region, and whoever controls the region controls the future of Africa's economy. But the real shock came when Nigeria and China announced a new financial agreement that bypasses the US dollar for certain transactions. This is something America has been worried about for years. If countries stop using the dollar for trade, America's global economic power begins to fade, and China knows this. By helping Nigeria reduce its dependence on the US dollar, China has struck at the very heart of American influence. Because once the dollar is weakened, US leverage around the world starts to collapse. This is why Washington is panicking. This is why US officials are holding emergency meetings. This is why global markets are paying attention. Nigeria is not just another country. Nigeria is a giant. Nigeria is a regional leader. Nigeria is a nation with enormous economic potential. Nigeria approved a massive multi-billion-dollar oil and infrastructure partnership with China, one that completely leaves out the United States. For years, American companies expected Nigeria to stick with Western oil giants. But instead, Nigeria gave China access to sectors that Washington considered off-limits. This partnership is not just about oil. It includes pipeline construction, refinery upgrades, advanced gas processing facilities, and a new national energy corridor that will give China unprecedented influence in the region. What shocked America the most is not the size of the deal, though it is huge, it's the symbolism. Nigeria, Africa's biggest oil producer, chose China over the United States at a time when the global energy market is unstable and competition for influence is at an all-time high. But that was only the beginning. Nigeria also agreed to allow Chinese state-backed companies to fund and support major transportation projects that connect ports, highways, and industrial zones. These projects are designed to boost Nigeria's economy, but they also give China long-term strategic access to West African trade routes. Washington sees this as a direct threat because whoever controls the trade routes controls the region, and whoever controls the region controls the future of Africa's economy. But the real shock came when Nigeria and China announced a new financial agreement that bypasses the US dollar for certain transactions. This is something America has been worried about for years. If countries stop using the dollar for trade, America's global economic power begins to fade, and China knows this. By helping Nigeria reduce its dependence on the US dollar, China has struck at the very heart of American influence. Because once the dollar is weakened, US leverage around the world starts to collapse. This is why Washington is panicking. This is why US officials are holding emergency meetings. This is why global markets are paying attention. Nigeria is not just another country. Nigeria is a giant. Nigeria is a regional leader. Nigeria is a nation with enormous economic potential. And now Nigeria is choosing a different path, one that aligns more with China than with the United States. American analysts are now warning that the world is entering a new era, an era where Africa no longer automatically looks to America, an era where China's rise in Africa becomes unstoppable, an era where Nigeria plays a central role in shaping the future of global politics. The question now is this: why did Nigeria do it? Why did Nigeria choose China over the United States at this moment? The answer is simple. Nigeria wants development, not promises. Nigeria wants infrastructure, not lectures. Nigeria wants investment, not interference, and China, unlike the United States, offers fast results. While Washington often ties its support to political conditions, China focuses on business. While America debates, China builds. While America warns Africa about risks, China offers cash, construction, and long-term cooperation. Nigeria looked at both sides and chose the one that delivers. But this new partnership is not without controversy. Some Nigerians worry about overdependence on China. Some fear that loans could lead to debt pressure. Some argue that American companies still provide better technology. But one thing is clear: Nigeria is now making decisions based on what is best for Nigeria, not based on what the West wants. And that shift in mindset is what scares America the most, because if Nigeria can do this, other African nations will follow, and if African nations follow, China becomes the most dominant global power in the next 20 years. The US knows this. China knows this. Nigeria knows this. And the world is watching. The global balance of power is shifting. The energy market is changing. The world is still reacting to the bold partnership between Nigeria and China, but behind the headlines there is a deeper story unfolding. A story that reveals not just a diplomatic shift, but a transformation in how nations negotiate power, influence, and economic survival. Because what Nigeria and China did is not simply about signing A deal, it's about rewriting decades of dependency, challenging global assumptions, and proving that Africa's largest economy is no longer afraid to make moves that shake the international system. To continue understanding the magnitude of this shift, we must look beyond the immediate panic in Washington and examine the long-term consequences that experts around the world are quietly whispering about, consequences that could reshape geopolitics for years to come. For years, America relied on a belief that its alliances in Africa were secure. The U.S. assumed that traditional partnerships, military support, and economic leverage would keep African nations aligned with Western interests. But Nigeria's decision to work closely with China exposes a truth that Washington underestimated. Countries are no longer satisfied with old promises. They want results. China's approach has always been straightforward: deliver infrastructure, deliver investment, deliver progress, and most importantly, deliver fast. Nigeria, like many African nations, grew impatient. The population is young. The economy is expanding. The demand for development is urgent. Waiting decades for Western partners to act is no longer an option. And China understood this urgency better than anyone else. But this continuation of Nigeria's partnership with China goes far beyond economics. It signals a new geopolitical identity for Africa, one where African nations negotiate from a place of confidence, not dependency. Nigeria's decision is not an accident. It is part of a larger continental awakening. Across Africa, nations are taking bold actions that challenge Western dominance. Ethiopia signed major tech and telecom deals with China. Kenya turned to China for railway and port investments. Egypt expanded military ties with China and Russia. South Africa deepened its role in the BRICS alliance. Angola, Tanzania, Zambia, and others restructured their economies with Chinese support. But Nigeria's involvement is the game changer. Nigeria is too big, too powerful, and too influential to ignore. When Nigeria moves, the world pays attention. And that is exactly what is happening now. The United States fears a domino effect if Nigeria fully aligns with China. If the US dollar is bypassed in more African transactions. If Chinese companies dominate African infrastructure, then Washington's influence in Africa will collapse faster than anyone thought possible. This is the core of America's panic, not that Nigeria made a deal, but that the world is witnessing a shift in global leadership. China is not just entering Africa, it is embedding itself into Africa's future, into the roads, ports, pipelines, and digital systems that will define the next century. But Nigeria's willingness to break tradition also shows something powerful. Africa is ready to make decisions based on national interest, not geopolitical pressure. For decades, Western policy toward Africa was built on leverage. Loans came with conditions, aid came with expectations, partnerships came with influence, support came with political demands. China shattered that model by offering deals with fewer conditions, faster delivery, and long-term infrastructure commitments. Whether critics like China's methods or not, one fact remains: China delivers tangible results that African nations can see and touch. Now Nigeria is using this to its advantage. For the first time in a long time, Nigeria is in the driver's seat. It can negotiate aggressively, play global powers against one another, and build the kind of partnerships that benefit its development goals, not the interests of foreign nations. This shift did not happen overnight. It came after decades of frustration, slow development, and unfulfilled Western promises. Nigeria is now making decisions from a position of strength, not desperation. But there's another side to this story. While China gains influence, Nigeria must remain careful. Partnerships bring opportunity, but they also bring responsibility. China's loans are large, its interests are strategic, and its global ambitions are intense. Nigeria must negotiate with confidence but also with wisdom. Protecting national assets, preserving sovereignty, and ensuring fair agreements will be critical as this relationship grows. But so far, Nigeria is showing confidence. It refused to be intimidated by America's warnings. It refused to bow to political pressure. It refused to stop its national agenda because of global fears. This sends a message to the world. Africa is becoming a center of global competition, not as a victim, but as a player. The United States knows it is losing grip. China knows it is winning influence, and Nigeria knows it is now too important to be ignored. So what happens next? The global energy market will shift, oil alliances will change, foreign companies will race to rebuild relationships. The US will attempt diplomatic repairs, China will expand its presence even further, but most importantly, other African nations will follow Nigeria's lead. If Nigeria can secure massive development by negotiating boldly, others will do the same. The future of geopolitics will not be written only in Washington or Beijing. It will be written in Lagos, Nairobi, Addis Ababa, Johannesburg, Cairo, Accra, and Abuja. Africa is no longer the background of global politics. It is becoming the center, and Nigeria's partnership with China is one of the clearest signs that the world's balance of power is shifting fast, whether the US likes it or not, whether the world is ready or not. Africa's rise cannot be stopped. And Nigeria just made sure of that.